Part 1.1. The first tape. The wind pressed against the glass of the studio as if someone was whispering with a cold breath. Mai Lam pushed open the heavy soundproof door. The musty smell of sound-absorbing felt and the smell of old iron mixed together, like the smell of a diary forgotten in a drawer for many years. She placed the wooden box on the table and opened the lid. 10 reel-to-reel tapes were neatly arranged. The plastic covers yellowed. On each label, a number was hastily written, the pen shaking. 1, 2, 3. She chose roll number 1. The old Revox clicked as Lamb inserted the cartridge. Uncle Sal Guy tapped the body of the machine as he wiped it. The tapping of someone who knew every screw. "Hear that it's calling," he said, his eyes smiling through his wrinkles. Old machines can hear old voices. What is old man? It's a language no one wants to hear anymore. Kim VU measured the light level, and it lit up 1 bar when Lamb pulled the power button. She took a deep breath and pressed play. For the first few seconds, there was only the rustling of ice, like rain hitting a tin roof from afar. Then a deep, slightly hoarse male voice broke out. "May have killed someone." Uncle Sal stood still, the towel hanging in the air. The voice paused, as if searching for words. In the silence, Lamb could clearly hear a steady tapping sound. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. Pause, like someone was tapping a pen against the table. Tap. 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 Lamb looked around. There was only her and Uncle Sal. The soundproof glass reflected the two of them into 2 faint images. The voice continued, "I don't remember his face. I only remember the light from the water tower. I only remember the sound of water vibrating in my ears, a sigh rubbed against the diaphragm, turning into a rustling sound." "Water tower," Lamb repeated, unconsciously. In Dalat, the water tower stood tall as a landmark. The old speakers on top of the tower still resonated during holidays. But the light coming down from the tower, that was strange. She rewinded a few seconds and listened again. Same sentence. Same tapping sound on the floor below. She looked at the wall clock. 10:23. The second hand moved steadily, without skipping. Uncle Sal cleared his throat. "Don't stop. Listen to the end. The tape continued. It could have been me. It could have been someone else. But if it had been me, then I was behind the glass. I saw my mouth move, and the sound wasn't mine. Lam shivered. The glass in front of her was fogged up with her breath. Studio 3 had 2 floors, the recording room and the control room, separated by thick glass walls. From the other side of the glass, the announcer often spoke to the recorder with his eyes. Sound traveled through wires, not air. She suddenly noticed something odd. The tapping in the background was irregular, but repeated in a 3-2 pattern. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes, and typed 3232. Was it some kind of signal, or just a habit of the speaker? On the other side, through the glass, a figure suddenly appeared. Both Lam and Uncle Sal looked up. The figure stood still, wearing a smooth glass mask, a glass that covered half of its face, reflecting the room itself, making it impossible to read its expression. Lam jumped. "Who is it?" she blurted out, her hand instinctively rubbing the stop button. Uncle Sal turned around, opened the control room door, and leaned over. There was no one there. The hallway outside was long and dark. The fluorescent lights were pale blue. He cursed softly. It must be a reflection. The double glass is always flashing. Lam placed his hand on the glass, his fingertips leaving a warm imprint. In the glass, the figure stood there for a moment, then dissipated like a dewdrop being brushed away. She pressed play again. If anyone hears this tape, the man's voice lowered to a whisper, "Please find Mr. Hoai. He knows how to listen to things no one else can hear. Tell him the station has begun erasing." The tape made a cracking sound, as if it had broken. Kim Vu fell to 0. The tape was still spinning, but there was only static. "Which Mr. Mai Lam?" asked Aura. Uncle Sal leaned against the machine, looking a few years older. "Why golden hour?" Back then, he broadcast the 6 p.m. show. His voice was deep and warm. Everyone who heard it remembered it. He retired a long time ago. His house was under Ba Trio Slope. But he lowered his voice. He had an accident 2 years ago. Since then, he has lived quietly like water. Lam quickly wrote down the address. She turned the tape back to the beginning, plugged in her headphones to check the noise spectrum. There was a strange ripple in the 1722 Hertz range, like an infrasound knocking on the door. The human ear couldn't hear it, but the body could feel it, a feeling of nausea, lightheadedness, as if she had lost her balance. She took off her headphones, looked the impression of the studio lights being too bright now. The red rec light, even though it wasn't on, was still imprinted on her forehead. "I'm going to see Mr. Hoy tonight," she said to her uncle. "Go early. That slope is very dark and foggy." Lam put roll number 1 back in its case, placing it next to roll number 2. Her finger paused on the label of roll number 2. Besides the number, there was another faint pen mark, as if it had been wiped off. A nuak. She brought it closer to the light water tower. Someone had written it, then wiped it off. She looked up. The glass in front of her was foggy again. A line of words appeared in the moisture, as if someone had written from the other side of the glass, "Don't look back." She swallowed. "Uncle Sal, do you—" The sentence was unfinished, because at the same time, in her ear, even though the machine was off, a whisper passed through like the wind through pine needles. "Don't rewind." Lam flinched, her instincts going against her instructions. She pressed right up to rewind a short section and play. The static came through. Then, not a man's voice, but a very familiar female voice. Younger, faster. "If it were me, please forgive me." She hung up. Her heart was beating 3-2 in her chest. Uncle Sal couldn't hear. His hearing was weak, and he was rummaging through the toolbox. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes, I'm fine." She held her breath, telling herself not to let this half-truth fool her. The sender could be the one playing a prank, or he could be asking for help. Outside the door, a drizzle began to fall. Mist like milk poured down the valley. In the distance, the water tower cast a dim light into the low sky, creating a halo of silence. Lam put on his coat, grabbed his bag, and tucked the number 1 tape into his inner shirt like a talisman. Before turning off the lights, she turned back to look at the studio. The glass was clear. No glare, no words, just her face, paled a shade, and behind her, the rows of sound-absorbing foam lined up like tombstones. She turned off the light. In the dark, somewhere between the two panes of glass, 3 very light knocks rang out tap, 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 then 2 more tap, tap. Part 1.2 The Guardian of Memory. The storage room on the ground floor always smelled of time, the cold scent of rotting paper, magnetic tapes, and old machine oil. Lam pushed open the door, revealing a yellow, incandescent light bulb hanging from the uneven ceiling. The wooden cabinet reached up to the beam, and inside it were reel-to-reel tapes stacked like fish scales. On the long table were a rubber hammer, a few markers, a bottle of antifungal spray, and a cracked enamel-faced table clock. The ticking of the clock's hands sounded like a whisper mixed with the wind. Mr. Ngu was sitting, his back hunched, his eyes downcast behind his thick glasses. He was writing something in his notebook, his pen tapping in a familiar rhythm. Lam paused because of the rhythmic pattern 3, then 2. It matched the tapping on the tape. Hello, teacher, Lam said. I'm Mai Lam, in charge of digitizing the tape storage. I just checked and found an anonymous tape and heard, he said, without looking up, the voice of one who owes sound. Indebted to sound, he put down his pen and looked up. His eyes behind the opaque glasses unusually bright. Sound has memory. You think it just vibrates and then dies. No. It clings to things. Felt holds the sound of words that have been said. Glass holds the shadow of tears cried alone. Real tape, it holds even the hesitation of the speaker. Someone passes by, leaving no footprints, but vibrations. Lam sat opposite, suddenly feeling his back straighten, as if he was in front of his old teacher. You used to keep this tape archive from the time the station was still broadcasting live. Yeah. Ever since I didn't know how to write my name. He chuckled, then started coughing. Lam noticed his fingers were shaking slightly, but they stopped at the 3-2 beat, as if programmed. You said anonymous. Right. But that's not right. It's signed. What signature? The tapping. He pointed to the table. The ring finger taps 3. The middle finger taps 2. This person speaks in front of the glass. The other hand taps 2. Keep calm. I heard that tapping many years ago. Lam shuddered. Who? He didn't answer right away. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box and opened it. Inside was an old plastic card. The Third Ear Society. A black card with peeling silver letters. Have you ever heard that name before? Lam shook his head. People like to believe in the third eye. But I believe in the third ear. Mr. Ngu said slowly and clearly. The radio station was still bustling, with a small group gathered late-at-night technicians, announcers, and a few special guests. They believe that there is a very low sound level below the threshold of human hearing that rises and falls with the wind and rain of Dalat. If we know how to tap into it, we can evoke or erase the short-term memories of the crowd. Do you believe it? He smiled wearily. I don't believe in power games, but I do believe in experimentation. They tried a lot. They turned on the loudspeakers on the top of the water tower to play infrasound at night. They turned on the sodium lamps periodically. They used tapes to record on top of each other to create a reverberation sound that fooled the ear. Once the whole town forgot the church bells one morning. No one remembered whether they had heard them or not. A blank space of 15 minutes. Lam remembered the White Days file Wudong mentioned. On the tape, the man confessing mentioned the light from the water tower echoing. The person on the tape is a member of the Third Ear Society. Yes, he put the card down and turned it over. The taps are their own signals in the studio. 3-2 is don't panic. 2-3 is power off. 1-1-1 is someone is listening. If you listen carefully to the tape, you'll hear a very soft 1-1-1 at the end. Lam's heart skipped a beat. She heard a familiar female voice as she rewinded the video. Before she could tell, the teacher continued, "Don't rewind randomly. A tape is like a pond. Rewinding is stirring up the mud. Some things will float. Some things should sink." Why? Erase memories. For what purpose? Lam asked. To clear the way, he poured water from an aluminum jug into an enamel cup and pushed it toward her. Every construction needs people to forget the old to believe the new. I'm not talking about philosophy. I'm talking about practicality at that time. There was a generous sponsor who poured money into the station. They wanted to recognize the brand everywhere. The station changed its theme song, changed its programs, changed its history. Whatever was stuck, they forgot. Whatever was right, they remembered. Gradually, people smiled kindly and said, "Oh, I must have been wrong." Mistakes became honesty. Lam heard and felt goosebumps. You said someone was in charge. I was the key to the vault, not the detective, he said with a smirk. But I knew there was a young man, talkative, quick to laugh, never missing a beat of 3-2, who connected the third ear with the donors. They called him the coordinator. They said he heard the voices of those who didn't speak on. What about Mr. Mai Lam asked softly. The tape says find Mr. Hoy. Hearing that name, Mr. Gu leaned his hand on the table, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. Hoy is the one who reads the golden hour. His voice used to soothe half the town through long rains. He did not join the association. He hated manipulation. He said radio should only remind people to remember, not teach them to forget. Lam pursed his lips. But why did he leave the station? One night, he lowered his voice. The station broadcast an urgent bulletin about a fire on the banks of the Yellow River. 3 of the 5 households managed to escape. No one died. The next morning, people said to each other, it was scary, but a week later, I went back to read the files. There was no bulletin. The backup recording from that night was blank. There was only static. Hoy banged on the glass of the studio, shouting. Who turned off the sound that scared people? Then he quit. In Lam's mind, there was the sound of rain condensing into white drops. She remembered the reflection of the masked glasses and the words, "Don't look back," written on the mist. Teacher, have you seen anyone around the studio lately? Is anyone wearing something like a masked glasses? Yes, he replied curtly, giving Lam goosebumps, but not around the studio, around the glass. What did you say? Some people want to hide their faces, but they like to look in the mirror to see how well they are hiding. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? You see yourself. And if the glass is thick enough, you see your own delay. The shadow wearing the mask of glass is time looking back. It stands in glossy surfaces, studio glass, clock faces, tape cases, and it says, "Don't look back." Because the more you look back, the later it gets. The air in the room was thick. Lamb took a sip of water. The cool liquid touched her tongue, bringing her back to the present. I need to back up the tapes before someone tries to clean them. She said, "I'm going to Mr. Hoai's house tonight." The teacher nodded slightly. "Go on." Ba True Slope. At the intersection with the pine tree with its top cut off, turn right. His house has a green tin roof, a white painted wooden door, and a small bronze bell. Knock 3-2 and he will know who is from the station. 3-2, Lamb repeated, stretching out the rhythm in his head. Teacher, if I want to recognize the coordinator, what sign should I look for? He left a void, not a trace. He said, his eyes suddenly sad. Where he passed, people remembered the deeds, but forgot the names. Like signs with the letters removed. I was walking in the market and suddenly couldn't remember the name of a familiar stall. I opened my notebook and saw a line of unfinished notes. That was his signature. Lam stood up and said hello. As she turned around, the teacher called out, "Mai Lam." Yes. If you ever hear your own voice on tape and can't remember when you spoke, don't panic. You've probably stood in front of a mirror and spoken for someone else. Here, people borrow each other's voices, like they borrow a lighter. The words went through her chest like a cold wire. She chuckled to ease the tension. I'll be careful. Being careful is not enough. He said, someone must remind you. Each person keeps the memory for someone else. People think I keep the tape. No, I keep the reminder. Find someone to remind you. Otherwise, the infrasound will make you remind yourself and get lost. Lam greeted again and stepped out into the narrow hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered for a moment and then went out. She fumbled for the switch and turned it on. The light returned, but it was dimmer. The glass door of Studio 3 at the end of the hallway was still as dark as a well. She walked, her steps naturally following the rhythm of 3-2 knock, 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 knock. When she reached the door, she stopped. There was a thin strip of dust on the glass. She drew a tentative line, leaving a bright line below. Her reflection tilted slightly. Behind her was an endless hallway. No mask, no person. She exhaled, turning away, and heard the tapping of a pen from deep in the archives. Click, 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 click. Not 3-2, but 2-3, the power off signal. Lam turned around so quickly that she almost slipped. Mr. Ngu, she called out, running back in. The door was open. The light was still yellow. The papers were still on the table. The third year association card was in its original place. But the clock on the table had stopped at 10:23. The same time Lam listened to the tape. The teacher's pen was still on the notebook. The tip of the pen touching exactly 3 dots of ink, breaking up like 3 silent notes. Teacher Lam slipped past the row of cabinets, looking under the table. Empty. She ran out into the hallway, looking left and right. At the end of the hallway was the door to the backyard, half open. The cold wind blew through the crack, making the bell hanging there ring softly. Jingle, jingle. The sound was as thin as a distant memory. She ran out into the yard. The fog had fallen thickly, swallowing the edges of the roof and the steps. Right in front of the yard, under the eaves, were wet marks as if someone had stood there for a long time and then left. Lam couldn't see the teacher anywhere, only on the cement floor, in graphite. Someone had written a short line and then erased it with a shoe, faintly showing the words, "Don't." The wind flipped the edge of her shirt, chilling her neck. Lam hugged her bag tightly, retreated inside, and pulled the door latch. From deep inside the building, a very faint buzzing sound came from the inside. The tape machine in Studio 3 switched to standby mode, even though she remembered turning it off. The tiny light at the bottom of the machine lit up with a green dot. In his pocket, his phone vibrated a message from Wudang. "Are you free? I need to ask about the station's white days." "Oh, and don't go to Ba Tru Slope alone tonight." Lam looked at her watch. 10:40. The fog was thickening outside. She tucked tape number 1 deeper into her pocket, took tape number 2 out, and put it in her backpack, planning to take it back to her office for a secret backup. Her hand touched the label of tape number 2, where the word Water Tower had been erased. A prickling sensation ran through her skin, a premonition that something had begun without her realizing it. She went back to the storage room to turn off the main circuit breaker. As soon as she reached the door, the light suddenly flickered once, and at that moment, on the glass surface of the ice chest, a masked figure flashed like a photographic image. The figure looked up at her, not moving, just listening. Lam stood still for half a second, then turned off the circuit breaker. Dark. In the dark, there was only the sound of the clock standing still at 10:23, and a very distant beat. 3-2, 3-2, as if coming from the heart of the water tower. Part 2.1, Wall of Hope. The town police station's records room was on the second floor of a yellowed building with a dark red tiled roof and a wooden door that creaked every time it was opened. Vu Dang, in a light blue shirt, holding a thick file, stood among rows of old shelves. On each shelf was a metal box labeled with the year. Inside were discolored papers and the damp smell of old files seeping into the fabric. He flipped to the 2017 file. The dates June 10, 15, and 21st were marked with red saved stamps. But when he pulled out the stack of papers, inside was blank. Just the title, incident report, and the date. No content, no signature. No stamp, a perfect blank space, as if nothing had ever been there. He checked several times over the past month. The result was the same every year. There were a few days where the files were blank. Not the entire file was missing, just the content. What was even stranger was that each of those blank days coincided with the time when people reported strange phenomena, losing track of time or forgetting important details of the day. There was a light knock on the door. Lieutenant Lam Jiang, a colleague, poked his head in. Mr. Dang. I found the audio recording of the night of June 21st, 2017. She placed an old hard drive on the table. Where did you get it? Dang asked. The radio archive. This drive is supposed to be broken, but Uncle Sao Guy can fix it. She smiled. Have you tried listening? Not yet. Leave it there. Dang opened his laptop, plugged in the hard drive, and turned on the audio file. The background noise was muffled by the speakers, mixed with the distant sound of rain. After about 10 seconds, a deep male voice rang out. Hello, everyone. Today is. Then the voice disappeared, replaced by a silence that lasted nearly a minute. When the voice returned, the sentence was in the middle, and the daytime temperature will be. It was as if a piece had been cut out, or filled with some kind of false silence. Listen carefully, Jang said. Underneath the silence, there is still sound. Dang turned up the volume. A low, steady, repeating beat, like a slow heartbeat, somewhere far away. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. He frowned. 3, 2. Does it make any sense? Jong asked. Not sure, but I heard Mai Lam mention it. He hung up and stood up. I need to see Lam right away. Late in the afternoon, Dang found Lam in her makeshift office in the attic. The room was small, just enough for a desk, a computer, a tape digitizer, and a few boxes of paper. The window looked out onto the hillside, where the water tower stood still, its silvery gray body covered in moss. You looking for me? Lam looked up and saw his tense eyes. Do you know about the blank days in the station's records? Dang asked directly. I know part of it, Lam said, handing him tape number 1. Listen to this. But you have to promise to listen to it all the way through, without rewinding. Dang turned on the phone and listened. When he heard the man's voice talking about the light coming down from the water tower, he glanced out the window. The water tower stood tall, its top covered with rusty old speakers. You think this is the key? I think. The water tower is not just for storing water, Lam replied. According to Mr. Gu, it used to emit infrasound on foggy nights. Infrasound can make people forget or remember according to the operator's wishes. And the white days, Dang continued, coincide with the time of infrasound. Maybe, Lam said softly. But who controls it, and why? I don't know yet. Dang took out an old color photo from his pocket, blurry from being taken in the fog. The photo was of a night scene of a town with pale yellow street lights, and in the middle, the top of the water tower emitting a faint green glow. This photo was taken on the night of June 21st, 2017, the same day the file was blanked. Lam held the photo and looked closely. In that green halo, if she squinted, she could see a blurry figure standing next to the speaker, wearing something shiny, probably glasses. Her heart pounded. "Do you have an enlarged copy?" "No," Dang said. The photographer was a tourist who sent it to me because he thought it was ghostlyly beautiful. They don't remember why they took it, though. Both were silent for a moment, only hearing the sound of the tape digitizer fan spinning. Lamb suddenly said, "Do you believe that the memories of an entire town can be bleached?" "I don't believe it," Dang replied. "But the records are blank. The tapes are blank. And people say they don't remember. Then we have to investigate." He went to the window and looked out at the water tower. The sky was gray and misty. From here, they could see the dew running down the tower like flowing letters. "Where are you going tonight?" he asked. "Batru Slope. Meet Mr. Hoy." Lam replied, "Don't tell me not to go." "No." Dang shook his head. "I'm going with you." At night, they stopped the car in front of Batru Slope. The headlights swept over the damp stone steps. A lone pine tree with its top cut off stood like a sentry post. Turning right, they saw a house with a green tin roof, a white painted wooden door, and a small bronze bell hanging on the porch. Yellow light shone through the crack in the door. Lam stepped forward and struck 3-2. The knock echoed inside, then stopped. No movement. She struck again, in the same rhythm, this time from inside. Came the faint sound of a bronze bell tinkling, tinkling twice, then 3 times. The door opened. A thin, gray-haired, deep-eyed man in a gray turtleneck stood there. "Mai Lam?" he asked, his voice low but warm. "Yes, Lam replied, a little surprised. "How do you know my name, Mr.?" Huai smiled tiredly. "The keeper of other people's memories. I remember for a long time." Dang looked at Lam. She swallowed. "Do you Recognize the voice on this tape? She asked, handing over tape number 1. Mr. Hoai did not take it, just waved his hand. Come inside. It's cold out here, and the water tower is breathing. They walked in. The house was small. The walls were covered with old photos of the station, tape recorders, microphones, and portraits of artists. In the middle of the room was a wooden table with a Revox reel-to-reel tape player, just like the one in the station. Mr. Hoai sat down and signaled them to play the tape. A man's voice on the tape rang out. "A may have killed someone." Mr. Hoai closed his eyes, tilted his head, as if listening not only to the voice, but also to the silence between the words. When the tape ran out, he opened his eyes. This voice is the controller's, but it's mixed with your voice. Lam was stunned. Your voice? Yes. Not one part. Several parts. They put your voice in place of the operator's hesitation. For what purpose? Maybe to create a lock. Only you can open the memories sealed in infrasound. Dang frowned. That means she was dragged into this before. No, Mr. Hoai shook his head. She had participated before, but she didn't remember because someone had erased that part of her memory. Outside the window, the fog suddenly thickened, wrapping around the water tower. A faint, low sound crept into the house, like the distant ringing of metal. Lam felt his chest heave, his heart beating in unison with the rhythm of 3-2. Mr. Hoai stood up and pulled the curtains. We have to talk quickly before it starts playing. What is it? Dang asked. Mr. Hoai looked at both of them, his eyes serious. The water tower. Tonight, it will be tested again. And if you are here when the infrasound reaches its peak, tomorrow morning, you will not remember why you came to me. Part 2.2. The clock runs backwards. Outside, the fog was so thick that the street lights became halos. From the water tower, a low sound spread down, like the sound of the air conditioner running deep under the skin. Both heard and felt in the bones. Mr. Hoai's tin roof shook slightly. The windows rattled as if someone was knocking outside. Mr. Hoai pulled open a drawer and took out an old pocket watch with a scratched glass and a tarnished gold hour hand. He placed it in the middle of the table. This is Uncle Sao Guy's watch. He made it to measure infrasonic frequencies. When the frequency reaches 17 hertz, the threshold of losing memory, the second hand will run backwards. Dang looked down. The second hand was still running normally, but shaking slightly. 17 hertz, Lam asked. Mr. Hoai nodded. The human ear cannot hear, but the brain can feel. This frequency coincides with the resonant frequency of some brain circuits, causing short-term memory to be interrupted. If combined with flashing lights and special background noise, it can create a blank space in mass memory. The bass outside deepened, making the window glass vibrate in faint circles. The clock's second hand vibrated harder, then click changed direction, starting to run backwards. It's starting. Mr. Huai said, "We don't have much time, so how can I avoid being affected?" Lam asked, his hands gripping the strap of his backpack. Keep your mind busy. Count the beats. Read people's names. Or constantly remind each other why you're here. Mr. Hoai gave each person a piece of blank paper and quickly wrote 3 lines. Name, what to do, who's coming with you. If you wake up tomorrow and your mind feels empty, read it again. Dang stuffed the paper into his pocket and asked, "Where is the coordinator?" Mr. Huai looked straight at him. Maybe right in the water tower tonight. The low rumble was suddenly accompanied by a metallic click, like the slow rewind of a tape. Green light began to leak through the fog from the window, dyeing the room the color of deep water. The second hand of the pocket watch turned faster, turning backwards. In the reflection of the glass, Lam suddenly saw not her own face, but a face wearing a glass mask, smooth, eyeless, mouthless, standing right behind her shoulder. She jumped back, her chair toppling over. You. See, she looked at Dang. See what Dang squinted. But all he saw was Lam trembling. No one. But Mr. Hoai nodded slowly. Yes. And it only appears to those who have been unlocked. Lam, you have been in this game longer than you think. Outside on the porch, a small bronze bell rang. Clang, clang. Not in the wind, but as if controlled by a hand. Mr. Hoai stood up. They are here. They want to take you to the white zone tonight. Without a word, the three of them ran toward the back door. Mr. Hoy led them through a narrow hallway and down a wooden staircase. The room below was dark, filled only with the smell of dampness and the hum of an old generator. He opened a wooden cabinet and pulled out a suitcase-sized metal box. Infrared filter. Uncle Sal made it for me. Wear these headphones, and waves below 20 hertz will be cut off. Lam and Dang put on their headphones, and the pressure in their heads immediately decreased, as if someone had just opened a window in a secret room. The second hand on Mr. Hoy's pocket watch was still running backwards, but it was slowing down. Now go outside, he said, but avoid looking directly at the water tower. They stepped out into the backyard. The mist was a little thinner here, but the green glow was still all around. The water tower hovered in the distance like a giant silhouette, its top glowing dimly, its halo pulsing in a 3-2 rhythm. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the mist, about 10 meters away from them, tall and thin, wearing a long coat, and on his face a glass mask that reflected a blue light. The person stood still, but the mist around his feet swirled lightly like water. Dang lowered his voice. That is, it's not the moderator, said Mr. Hoy. It's just a gatekeeper. If we step through, the memories will be blocked. The figure raised its hand, signaling to turn back. There was no voice, but in Lamb's mind, a whisper rang out, cold and clear. Don't rewind. She shook her head vigorously, clinging to the thought. My name is Mai Lam. What to do? Find the coordinator. Who to go with Wudong? But that whisper repeated, each time clearer, as if someone was standing right next to her ear. Dang whispered, Go around. Follow the old ditch. They backed away, around a row of tea trees, toward the ditch behind the house. The infrasound gradually faded thanks to the filter, but just as they reached the edge of the ditch, Lamb suddenly slipped on the wet ground. His backpack slipped off his shoulder and fell into the water. She bent down to pick it up and unzipped it to check. Tape number 2 was still there, but the label was gone. In its place was a smudge of ink, like writing blurred in the rain. She strained her eyes to read. Try the end. Let's go. Dang pulled her up. They crossed the ditch and entered the dark alley leading down to the street. As the three of them stopped under the awning of a watch repair shop, breathing heavily, Mr. Huai pointed to the wooden sign in front of the door. Mr. Sao Guy is here. We need him to decode the second tape before the moderator does anything. Inside the shop, yellow lights illuminated countless clocks, table clocks, and pocket watches. The ticking sound echoed in unison like a steady rain of drops. Uncle Sao Guy stepped out, still wearing a faded cloth jacket, holding a magnifying glass. Oh, it's been a long time since I've seen so many people. You guys just passed through the subterranean region, right? He looked at Mr. Hawaii's pocket watch and curled his lips. You've gone back almost 3 times. Lam handed over tape number 2. Can you restore the overwrite? Uncle Sao flipped through it, tapping the tape core lightly. Maybe, but when the overlay is separated, there will be things that should be heard and things that shouldn't be heard. Go ahead. Lam said, we need it all. Uncle Sao nodded, brought the tape to his desk, and inserted it into the machine. The sound of the tape rewinding echoed, mixed with the ticking of dozens of clocks. The second hand of a large wall clock hanging behind him suddenly stopped, then ran backwards. Well, Uncle Sao chuckled. It seems like it doesn't want you to listen to this roll. He pressed the button. Static erupted, and then a male voice rang out. Urgent! One last try. If it fails, the water tower will. The sound was cut off abruptly, replaced by a 3-2, 3-2 knocking sound that lasted nearly 10 seconds. Lam and Dang looked at each other. Mr. Hoai closed his eyes and said softly, the last test means the plan is almost complete. Outside the shop, the rain began to fall, heavy and steady. In the glass of the wall clock, 3 figures were reflected, and a 4th figure, wearing a mask, stood behind Lam, motionless. Part 3.1 Singing Water Tower. The rain gradually thickened, the raindrops as small as needles, intertwining into a shimmering curtain before the eyes. The night in Dalat was cold. The breaths of the 3 people were white, high above. The water tower stretched out in the mist, its round top topped by an old rusty speaker, facing the town in all 4 directions. Green light leaked from the gaps between the steel plates, pulsing in a 3-2 rhythm, blending into the deep vibrations like a giant heartbeat. Uncle Saugai had lent them a new, more compact set of infrasound filtering headphones, along with a handheld meter. The screen read 17.03 Hz and was slightly oscillating. Touching 17 Hz is the white zone, he warned. If you see the number jump above 18 run, that's when the memory is not only erased, but overwritten. The path leading up to the water tower was a paved slope, lined with old pine trees. The wind blew, and the smell of pine resin mixed with the smell of rusted iron. Up above, a singing began to be heard, not words, but a range of tones, sometimes high, sometimes low, like the sound of strings vibrating underwater. "This sound," Lam said softly, "sounds like it's coming from inside my head." Mr. Huai nodded, his eyes never leaving the top of the tower. It takes advantage of the hollow structure of the tower and the amount of water inside. When the speaker plays infrasound, the water resonates, creating a singing sound that seems to come from everywhere. People below don't know where the source is, and their brains accept it more easily. They walked to the foot of the tower. The tower was covered with moss. The iron door at the foot was locked with a large, rusty but sturdy padlock. Next to the door was a faded sign, "No entrance to construction." Above, through the narrow window bars, green light still shone out, swaying like reflected water. The meter jumps to 17.25 Hz. "There's not much time left," Dang said. "We need to get in." Mr. Hawaii took out an old set of keys from his pocket and flipped through them. "I read about this tower a long time ago. There is a technical tunnel leading from the old pump house at the foot of the hill. This door is just the main entrance." "Which side is the pump house?" Lam asked. "To the left, along the bank of the stream," he replied. They turned back and followed the stream. The sound of running water mixed with the singing, creating the feeling that the whole stream was whispering. In the darkness, a low structure with a corrugated iron roof appeared. The wooden door rotted, the sign missing half of the letters. Inside, there was a musty smell and old engine oil. In the middle of the room was a round iron hatch, just big enough for one person to crawl through. Dang turned on the flashlight and looked down the spiral iron staircase, led deep down. The cold wind blew up, carrying the sound from the tower. Lam stepped down first, his flashlight scanning the damp walls. At the end of the stairs was a narrow hallway, leading to a steel door. The door was ajar, green light leaking out through the narrow crack. 1789 has jump meter. We're in the override zone, Uncle Six had said. Be careful. Dang signaled for silence. They pushed the door open and entered. It was a round room with a high ceiling and walls of pipes and wires. In the middle of the room was a giant water tank, its surface rippling with ripples. Above the tank, a metal frame suspended from it was dozens of microphones and small speakers, all aimed at the water. And standing by the tub was the coordinator. He was tall and slim, wearing an ash-colored robe, his hair covering half his face. The blue light reflected off his sharp cheekbones. In his hand was a device that looked like a mixing board, the lights flashing in a 3/2 rhythm. He looked up, his eyes cold and bright. Finally, Lam tightened his backpack strap. You're the coordinator. He smiled. I keep this town clean of unnecessary memories, useless fears. You call it erasure. I call it liberation. Mr. Huai took a step forward. You are stealing other people's right to remember. The right to remember. He chuckled. People want to forget. I just help them do it faster. The meter jumped to 18.05 hertz. A feeling of lightness crept into Lam's head. The surrounding images seemed to sway. For a moment, she forgot where she was, what she was here to do. But the piece of paper in her pocket touched her finger. Name. What to do. Who is with her pulled her back. What are you going to do tonight? Dang growled. He tilted his head. One last try. After tonight, no one will remember the fire that year. No one will remember the evacuations, and no one will remember Mr. Y. Mr. Y clenched his fists. Lam looked around and saw a sub-control panel on the side of the tank. Wires led out from there. It could cut off the infrasound. But to get there, he had to go around the path near the operator. You can erase me, Lam said slowly, but you can't erase everything. Someone else will remember. The coordinator looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. You said the same thing. before you press the button to erase your memories.
Lam paused. What did you say? He pointed at the water. The waves on the surface suddenly swirled, revealing an image of Lam himself, standing in this room. Next to him, his hand on the control panel, his mouth saying, "Start erasing." Then the image disappeared. The infrasound vibrated strongly. The meter jumped to 18.27 Hertz. Dang swayed, his hands against the wall. Mr. Why gritted his teeth, took a metal ball from his pocket, and threw it at the speakers hanging from the ceiling. One speaker fell down. The bass stopped for a beat. The gap was enough for Lam to lunge for the sideboard. She yanked the power cord. The singing broke into a screech, then stopped. The green light faded. The moderator wasn't angry, just smiled vaguely. Cut a beat, but not the whole song. He retreated into the shadows behind the basin, covered by mist, and then disappeared. The meter dropped to 16.92 Hertz. The air seemed lighter, but the room still vibrated very slightly, as if the heart of the tower had not yet stopped. Mr. Why breathed heavily. We've only delayed it. Next time, he won't show his face. Lam clenched the piece of paper in his pocket. Cold sweat ran down his back. But in his mind, a question repeated. Have I really pressed the erase button or not? Part 3.2. The Voice of the Absent. The rain had stopped, but the mist was still thick, like a wet towel covering the town. The slope down from the water tower was slippery. The pavement was stained with yellow lights. The singing had stopped. Only the sound of water drops falling from the pine trees to the stone floor remained. The three of them walked in silence, each still holding in their minds the image they had just seen on the water, the image of Lam pressing the delete button himself. Uncle Sao Guy was waiting under the awning of the watch repair shop. As they arrived, he saw something in Lam's eyes. He showed you, didn't he? Lam nodded slightly. A part. But I don't know if it's true or not. Uncle Sao pulled out a chair and motioned for them to come in. The room was warmer. The smell of wood and engine oil permeating the air. He took tape number 3 from a drawer. I've already pre-filtered it. There's something you need to hear. He turned on the machine. There was static. Then a familiar male voice. The moderator's voice said, "We'll start when the red light on the water tower flashes 3-2. Don't be afraid if you see yourself in the water." Dang frowned. He said, "Us." To whom? Uncle Sal pressed the button to slow down. Below the male voice, in a lower pitch, a female voice replied, I understand. When it's over, delete me too. Lam was stunned. That voice was hers. She turned to Mr. Hawaii. He looked at her. His eyes filled with suspicion and pity. Lam, you were here. You participated. He's not lying. I can't remember. Lam shook his head, his hands clenching into fists. If I agreed, why am I fighting him now? Uncle Sal spoke up. There are two possibilities. One, your memories were erased according to the agreement. Two, someone overwrote them, turning you into someone else. Dang leaned against the clock cabinet and spoke slowly. If the memory is erased, there are still traces on the voice. We can trace the time of recording by analyzing the sound signature breathing habits, punctuation, vibration of the vocal cords, like fingerprints. Need powerful equipment. Uncle Sal nodded. And uncompressed master tapes. Mr. Hawaii pondered. I know a place. The station's backup tape vault. The Black Studio. No one has been there since the Third Ear Society was dissolved. But the key is in someone's hands. Who? Lam asked. Yen Chi, he replied. The owner of the tea shop, small post office. An old friend of yours, right? Lam was surprised. Chi is in this, Mr. Hawaii said slowly. She is the one who receives and transfers most of the tapes in and out of the station. No one suspects the package. If the coordinator wants to send tapes to her or take tapes from her, no one will notice. Dang nodded. Then tomorrow morning, we will go see Yen Chi. That night, Lam lay on the bed in the small rented room next to the radio, eyes wide open. The clock on the wall was ticking. In the darkness, she thought she heard the sound of 3-2 somewhere far away. Each knock was a flash of light in her memory. But when she tried to grasp it, it vanished like foam. She fell asleep and dreamed. In her dream, she stood in the middle of a black studio with the moderator in front of her and a water tower behind her. He handed her a tape, saying, "When everything is done, this is yours." She took it, feeling the tape warm in her hands, and on the label, there was only one line, "Voices of the Absent." You will read it as you read yourself. He continued. Then the singing flooded in.
sweeping everything away.
Lam jumped up, sweat dripping down her back. The clock said 3:17 a.m. She sat down and poured herself a glass of water. In the glass of the window, she caught a glimpse of a figure wearing a mask standing outside. She blinked nothing. Only droplets of fog remained on the glass. The next morning, Lam, Dang, and Mr. went to Yen Chi's tea shop. It was located on a corner with a honey-colored wooden door and a handwritten sign. The bell jingled as they entered. The warm scent of oolong tea filled the air, overpowering the damp smell of morning dew. Yen Chi stepped out from behind the counter, her hair tied up, a slight smile on her face. Lam, long time no see. Are you here for tea or to pick up a package? Both, Lam replied. I need the key to the black studio. Chi's smile faltered. That room has been closed for a long time. Why do you want to go in, Lam? Because I need the original tape, Lam said bluntly. The one with the moderator's voice. And mine. Chi was silent for a moment, then turned to make tea. Do you remember, Lam? Before Lam went to the city, we went into that room once, Lam told me. If anyone came to ask for the key, to ask only one question. Can you hear my voice? Lam swallowed. And if I say yes, she placed the cup of tea in front of her. Then I will give you the key. But Lam, can you really hear my voice in all that is happening? Chi's eyes were deep, as if they wanted to penetrate her. For a moment, Lam heard Chi's voice blending with the faint singing from afar. And somewhere, a deep male voice interjected. If you say yes, everything will start over. Lam looked up, intending to answer Section 4.1, Shadow Maps. The oolong tea steamed up, fragrant and gentle, but Lam felt his throat dry. Yen Chi's question still hung between the two of them. Can you hear my voice? She took a deep breath. Yes. Yen Chi's expression did not change. He only took out a small bunch of keys from his apron pocket, picked out a tarnished silver key, and placed it on the table. The black recording studio is in the basement behind the tape storage. The door is covered by a bookshelf. When you enter, remember to close the door. It doesn't like strangers. Dang frowned. What do you mean? Don't like it? Chi shrugged. Feel it yourself. But if you don't want to get lost, don't let the lights go out while you're inside. Mr. Huai took the key and nodded his thanks. What's on the tape? She turned to the counter and poured more tea. Map. What map? Lam asked. Shadow map.
She replied. The town's memory gaps are pieced together like a puzzle. Each time the infrasound sweeps through, it erases a patch, leaving a shadow. Anyone who still has some memory will feel that shadow. If you draw it, you'll see the white areas connecting.
Lam remembered what Master Ngu said. Wherever he went, people remembered the events, but forgot the names. The coordinator is using this map to erase each piece, not just erased, she said, looking down at her tea. He changed the path of the memory. When the piece came back, it wasn't the same.
A wind blew through the glass door, making the bell ring slightly. Lam suddenly saw the reflection of the tea shop on the glass door. But in the reflection, Yanqi was not there. She turned her head. She was still standing at the counter, her back turned. In the afternoon, they returned to the radio station. The tape storage was dark and smelled musty. Mr. Huai pushed a bookshelf against the wall, revealing a narrow iron door. The silver key fit perfectly. The door opened, revealing a short staircase leading down to the black recording studio. The fluorescent lights in the studio ceiling were black and white, reflecting off the walls, which were covered in charcoal-colored sound-absorbing material. In the middle of the room was an old, dusty console, and dozens of tapes were scattered about. In the corner, a large map hung on a pinboard covered with a tarp.
Dang pulled the cloth down. Below was a map of the town, covered with semi-transparent circles connected by red lines. Each circle had a note: White Day, June 10, 2015. White Day, June 21st, 2017. The circles overlapped in certain areas: the water tower, the square, the bus station, and even Yanqi's tea house. This is, Lam whispered, the infrasound route.
Mr.
Huai pointed to an empty area in the middle of the map. This area has never been cleared before. If the moderator wants to complete, this will be the final target.
Where Dang asked, "The old hospital," he replied, "where the records of the fire at the Yellow River are kept."
Uncle Sao. Guy came down the stairs holding a tape recorder. I just checked tape number 3 again. Besides Lam's voice, there was another female voice. At first I thought it was static, But when I separated it, it was clearly Yenchi's voice. The room fell silent. Lam looked at Mr. Hoai, then at Dang. Chi, join Mr. Hoai shook his head slightly. Either you join or you are forced. The coordinator never works alone. He always needs a gatekeeper. Uncle Sal put the recorder on the table and turned on the split audio. Yenchi's voice rang out, low and steady. The shadow map is complete. When you're done, delete it for me. Lam shuddered. That sentence was exactly like what Lam said on the tape. Delete me too. Dang crossed his arms, thinking maybe all the gatekeepers voluntarily deleted themselves when they completed their mission so as not to leave any evidence. Outside, the wind whistled through the cracks in the door, and from somewhere came a 3-2 knock. Then silence. Mr. Hoai pulled out an old drawer and took out a large tape labeled Shadow Map. This is the only recording of the entire memory erasing process. If we play it in reverse, we might be able to restore some of the erased memories. Uncle Sal tilted his head. But rewinding is stirring up mud. Things no one wants to remember will surface. Lam touched the tape. I'm ready. The fluorescent light on the ceiling suddenly flickered. In that dark moment, the glass of the ice chest reflected the whole group, but Shaolin, only Dong, Mr. Hoai, and Uncle Sal remained. The lights came back on. Lam was still standing there, but a chill ran down her spine. Did anyone just see? She asked. I see. Dang replied softly. Part 4.2, Black Studio. No one spoke for a few seconds. The studio was pitch black, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. The smell of old dust and damp felt rose, becoming heavier. Lam felt every hair on the back of her neck stand on end. The reflection just now was like a test erase aimed at her. Uncle Sao Gai broke the silence. If you decide to play it backwards, you have to be prepared. The frequency, when inverted, will not be like normal infrasound. It goes up and down continuously, easily making the listener get lost in memories that do not belong to them. Mr. Hoai nodded. Everyone wears filtered headphones, but only Lam listens directly. This tape is locked to your voice, so only you can open it. Dang stood close to Lam. If you feel disoriented, stop immediately.
I will cut the power.
Lam swallowed and sat down in front of the console. In front of her, the tape machine was ready. The shadow map reel was still. She took a deep breath and pressed Regu. The two tapes spun, the metallic sound of friction steady. When the needle stopped at the beginning, she reached for the play button.
The first sound was a low but discontinuous one. It rose and fell like a breaking wave. Instantly, the black room changed. The walls were darker. The space seemed several meters deeper. She heard rain, running footsteps, and heavy breathing.
An image flashed through his mind. The town square, dark at night, people jostling each other in one direction. Behind him, the firelight reflected off the mist. A deep male voice shouted, "Quick, take the children to the water tower." And next to him was Lam himself, a few years younger, his face cold, nodding. She shivered, but did not stop. The sound continued. The 3-2 knocking interrupted, and then a female voice rang out, not hers, but Yen Chi's. "This area is white. Let's go to the stream. Leave the hospital records to me." The image changed the narrow staircase of the old hospital, the lights flickering. Lam and Chi carried a box of files down to the basement. At the end of the hallway, the coordinator waited, his hands on a small control panel, the green light reflecting off his face. Lam Dang's voice pulled her back. She blinked, realizing she had stood up from her chair, one hand touching the soundproof wall. "I was just about to go out." She shook her head, sitting back down. "I saw the fire at the Yellow River. I was there, and Chai was there too." Uncle Sal frowned. "Continue." She nodded. The sound shifted again, deeper. She heard running water, a distorted speaker, and then a male voice whisper, "Don't let them remember, because if they do, they'll ask why no one saved you." Soon the fire returned, but this time it was different. The fire was not spreading as quickly as reported. A group of people, including the coordinator, stood at the edge of the fire, as if waiting until the water tower lights flashed 3-2. Then the tower loudspeakers blared infrasound, and the crowd scattered in the other direction away from the fire. Lam felt her blood run cold. She turned to Mr. Huai. It was not an accident. The fire was used to create the first white day. Mr. Hawaii clenched his fists. I have suspected for a long time, but now I have evidence. The tape machine began to make an unusual clicking noise, as if someone were tapping the tape deck. The fluorescent lights in the ceiling flickered, and at that moment, the mirrored face of a masked figure was reflected on the console. But this time, he didn't stand still. He raised his hand, making a cutthroat gesture. Lam startled and turned around. No one. The sound of the ice became more intense, then stopped abruptly. The machine stopped automatically. The clock on the wall stood still at 10:23. Uncle Sal rushed over to check. The tape is still there, but it's locked. Dang asked, "How is the lock?" Uncle Sal unrolled the tape and pointed to a piece of tape with a silver streak. Physical lock. Someone coated it with a thin layer of metal compound, and the reader automatically shuts down to avoid damaging the magnetic head. This is the coordinator's type of lock. Lam leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. He knows we'll hear, and he wants us to know. Mr. Hawaii said softly, "Enough to bring you back to the fire and the old hospital." They decided to leave the dark studio with the iron door closed. The light in the hallway seemed warmer, but Lam still felt a layer of cold cling to his skin. In his pocket, the piece of paper with name, task, whose width was wet and smudged. Only the words whose width were visible and below it. The coordinator. Lam stopped. The piece of paper has been changed. Dang looked, his face dark. He is taking a step forward. Mr. Hawaii pointed to the shadow map still hanging on the wall of the tape vault. The last area that hasn't been erased is the old hospital. If he finishes, everything about the fire will be gone forever. We have to get there before he does. Part 5.1, the 10th tape. The old hospital on the hill west of town had long been abandoned. In the rainy season, grass grew knee-high, and vines tangled around the rusty railings. The walls were stained with yellowish-white paint, and the windows were broken in patches, revealing a dark interior. Lam, Dang, Mr. Hawaii, and Mr. Sao. Guy climbed the stone steps, their shoes covered in dry, rotten leaves, the smell of mold, old disinfectant and rotten wood mixed together, so strong it was hard to breathe. Each step on the old tiles made a soft clicking sound, echoing down the empty hallway as if someone was walking alongside. Uncle Sal handed Lam the frequency meter. The display jumped to 16.85 hertz and then slowly increased. "He has started preparing," he said. The ground floor of the hospital was the administrative area, with tables and chairs overturned and paper files in pieces. The group followed the old map that Mr. Huai remembered and found the archives in the basement. The iron door at the end of the hallway was locked with a new lock that didn't match the decay of the wall. Dang used the crowbar to pry. The hinges creaked and then popped open. The door opened. A cold, damp smell hit his face. Inside was pitch black, lit only by the beam of a flashlight. In the middle of the room was a long wooden table, on which was placed a reel-to-reel tape, brand new, with a white label written in black pen. On the wall behind the desk, someone had painted a large circle in silver paint, inside which was the symbol for 3-2 repeated 3 times. The circle reflected the flashlight like a cold eye. "The 10th tape," Lam whispered, "must be the last try." Uncle Sal approached. Just as he was about to touch the tape, a male voice rang out from a speaker somewhere in the room. "You came just in time. And as always, right at the moment I wanted." The moderator stepped out of the shadows in the corner of the room. His coat was long, his hair half covering his face. His eyes were cold. Behind him, a green light fell from a device mounted on the ceiling, a portable infrasound transmitter. He looked straight at Lam. "Do you remember the night of the fire? You helped me clean up all the evidence. And you said, if there's one last time, leave me here." Lam tried to keep his voice calm. "If I said it, I take it back now." He chuckled. "Memory is not a contract to be torn up. It is architecture. Once the foundation is laid, tearing down the walls only causes it to collapse and everything inside." Dang stepped forward, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. "What is your real plan?" The coordinator looked around the room, as if he were standing in an abandoned church. "It's not just about erasing the fire. It's about reshaping the entire town. No one remembers the relocation.
No one remembers who opposed the resort. No one remembers us. There's only a new, clean story, and I'm writing it.
The meter in Uncle Sal's hand jumped to 17.90 hertz. The bass began to penetrate Lamb's chest, making her heart beat in a 3-2 rhythm. The coordinator's figure gradually faded, as if blending into the background wall. Why shouted Lamb, listen? She quickly put on her filtered headphones. The bass was muted, but the image still wavered slightly, like glass vibrating. And in the reflection of the silver circle on the wall, she saw herself standing next to the moderator, her hand on the tape, smiling. She turned away, avoiding the image, focusing on the present. You can't decide the town's memories, she said. The coordinator walked over to the table and placed his hand on tape number 10. I don't decide, I clean up. Dang rushed forward, but the mist from the infrasound device poured down, making the room seem dense. His movements slowed, the noise in his ears like water flowing backward. Lam saw a small control panel next to the table. The wire leading to the infrasound generator. If the power cord was cut, everything would shut down, but the distance to get there would be past the operator. She took a deep breath, remembering the 3-2 taps she heard on the tape. 3 steps forward, 2 steps away. She lunged forward, 3 steps straight at the table, then spun away from him to the left, touched the power cord, and yanked. The bass broke into a high hiss, then stopped. The mist cleared. The coordinator paused, the blue light in his eyes fading. But he just smiled. Can't turn it off tonight, but the tape is still here. He retreated into the shadows, disappearing as if melting into the wall, leaving tape number 10 on the table. Uncle Sal quickly collected the tape and put it in a moisture-proof box. Mr. Huai grabbed Lamb's shoulder. Let's take it back to the station. If we play it backwards properly, we can restore all the erased memories. Dang looked around the room and muttered, or it will all be erased. The flashlight beam swept across the silver circle one last time. For a split second, all 3 saw in their reflection not only their group, but dozens of strange figures, blurred faces, eyes blank, standing still, as if waiting for someone to give them orders. Section 5.2, Stop Button. That night, the radio station was bathed in a dim yellow light, Lam, Dang, Mr. Hoy, and Uncle Sal. Guy stood in studio number 3, the glass room that once reflected the silhouette of a man in a glass mask. In the middle of the control table, tape number 10 was ready. The old Revox reel-to-reel tape machine was cleaned. The signal wire was connected directly to the broadcasting system. The plan was simple: play the tape live. But instead of using a mute to erase memories, Uncle Six adjusted the phase inversion filter. Anyone who had been whitened would experience a reverse shock, awakening buried memories, but the effect would also temporarily disorient them. And most importantly, it would draw the moderator out into the open. Mr. Hawaii sat in the announcer's chair, put his hand on the microphone. His voice was deep and firm. Dear listeners, this is a special program. Please listen. He signaled Lam to press play. The tape played back, not static, but the moderator's voice, clear and slow. You have slept too long. Now is the time. And then the syncopation flooded in, vibrating like a tornado in my ears. Lam looked through the control room's glass. The red on-air light was on, signaling the signal was going out to the whole town. Outside, the people would hear it all at once. Those who were erased would see images of a fire, a water tower, or the moment they lost something and remember. Suddenly, a 3-2 knock sounded, not from the tape, but from the studio glass door. The group turned. On the other side of the glass, the moderator stood, maskless. His face was so plain it was hard to remember, but his eyes were as bright as steel. He stepped into the control room, his mouth moving, but the noise of the phase inverter turned his words into broken fragments. Stop. You. It's me. Dang rushed to hold the door. Uncle Sal adjusted the volume knob, pushing the phase inversion frequency to maximum. The moderator paused, holding his head, eyes wide. His reflection in the glass began to blur, and another shadow rose to replace it. The shadow of Lam, younger, cold, pressing the stop button. Lam saw that image and understood a part of her used to be a gatekeeper, used to work with him, but the erased memory left a void, and that void he was trying to get back. She walked to the console, placing her hand on the stop button. The operator looked at her. his eyes sparkling with hope and challenge. You press it, and everything will be quiet, he said, his voice clear now, over the phase distortion. No one will remember anything, not even you. Lam looked at him, then at the red on-air light. Outside, hundreds of people were listening. Memories were emerging. She remembered what Master Ngu said. Each person holds the memories of another person. If she pressed the button, everyone would lose their memories again. But if she didn't, she would have to live with everything she had done. She took a deep breath, then turned the volume knob all the way up. The phase shift sounded like a storm. The moderator roared, his reflection on the glass disintegrating into a series of different faces, then disappearing completely. The on-air light blinked. The tape machine roared, then stopped. Red light off. Silence outside. The town was shrouded in mist. But in many places, lights were on in the houses. People stepped out onto their balconies, calling each other on their phones. They remembered. They named the fire. They mentioned the missing. They asked why the records had disappeared. In the studio, the only sound was the heavy breathing of the four people. Lam pulled out tape number 10, put it in the box, and locked it. The end, she said, but her voice was shaking. Mr. Huai shook his head. No, just stop. Uncle Sal pointed to the button on the tape player. It was still lit, but not on air. But stop. The stop button still had fresh handprints. Dang looked at Lam. You kept all your memories, including your own. She nodded, looking out the window. The mist was clearing, revealing the still water tower. But for a moment, she swore she saw a figure in a mask and glasses, standing still, as if to say, "Don't think the game is over." The story ends there, with the town's memories restored. But the shadow of the moderator still lingers, and Lam, now carrying the memories of the gatekeeper within him, knows that the real game has just begun.